without distractions. So don't worry. There are only a few ads in the first 15 minutes, and after that, it's all completely ad-free. I hope you'll give this video a chance, because I truly believe you won't find stories quite like these anywhere else. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together.
What if the person sleeping beside you every night wasn't really human? At first, you wouldn't notice. Their smile would look real, their voice warm, their habits perfectly normal. But then, tiny cracks would start to show, little details that don't quite add up. And suddenly, you'd realize the life you thought you knew was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. That's exactly what happened to me. It all began with one ordinary dinner, and a single question that I should never have asked. That evening, over a simple meal, I mentioned the building I had seen at the edge of the property. My words were casual, almost careless, but Lena froze. Her fork paused halfway to her lips, and in that small hesitation, I felt the weight of something hidden. "Oh, that?" she finally said, her voice light but a little too controlled. "It's just storage. Old research equipment, mostly. Nothing that would interest you," I smiled, pretending not to notice the way her tone didn't quite match her words. I'd still like to see it sometime. What followed was only 2 seconds of silence, but it stretched long enough to feel like an eternity. Then Lena smiled again, the same gentle smile she always wore. Only this time it didn't reach her eyes. It was as if a curtain had been pulled shut, concealing something I wasn't supposed to see. "Of course," she said softly. "When you're stronger," and just like that, the subject was closed. But my curiosity was anything but satisfied. In fact, it had only just begun to grow. High voltage transition for retention. But that night, something happened that made me question everything, even Lena herself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight streamed through our bedroom window, washing the room in silver, but my mind kept circling back to Lena's reaction at dinner. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe she really was just tired. But then I heard it. Lena's breathing. It was perfectly steady, perfectly unnatural. People don't breathe like that when they sleep. They shift, they sigh, sometimes they even snore. But Lena's breaths were mechanical, like the slow rise and fall of a machine designed to imitate life. I turned onto my side to watch her. Her face in the moonlight was breathtaking, calm, angelic, almost too perfect. Yet the stillness of her features unsettled me. She didn't look like a woman peacefully asleep. She looked like a photograph of one, frozen in an imitation of rest. I told myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was off. High voltage transition for retention. And the next morning, my suspicions only grew, because that's when the first episode struck. The morning came like any other, sunlight spilling through the curtains, but I felt heavier than usual. My mind was clouded with images of Lena lying still in the moonlight, her breathing so precise, so inhuman. I went to the bathroom, razor in hand, trying to push the unease aside. But as I leaned closer to the mirror, something made my stomach twist. The reflection staring back at me looked wrong. Not scarred, not injured, as you might expect from someone who had supposedly survived a terrible accident. But wrong. The face was familiar yet foreign, like meeting a distant relative who carried your bone structure but none of your soul. I froze. My hand trembled as I touched my cheek, and the reflection mimicked me perfectly, yet it felt disconnected, like I was watching someone else wear my skin. Then I saw it. Just above my left ear, at the hairline, was the faintest trace of something. A thin line, subtle but unmistakable, like the beginning of a scar. My breath caught, my chest tightened. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. That wasn't just a scar. It was a seam. High voltage transition for retention. But the truth was only beginning to unravel, and what I discovered next the scar wouldn't leave my mind. All day, no matter what I did, My hand kept drifting to the side of my head, fingers brushing against the faint ridge beneath my hair. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a childhood injury I'd forgotten, or maybe a scratch from the accident. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't normal. And once you start seeing something, you can't unsee it. That night at dinner, I found myself studying Lena again. Every small detail, the way she chewed with perfect rhythm, every bite the same size, every motion precise. The way she smiled on cue but never quite reached her eyes. The way her breathing never faltered, even as she laughed softly at something I'd said. It was flawless, too flawless. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her breathing beside me. Steady, mechanical, relentless. Sometimes, I thought I could hear the faintest click in her chest, like gears aligning. And when I opened my eyes, she was always there, perfectly still, like she'd been waiting. During the day, the paranoia followed me. Reflections in windows felt delayed, as if the person staring back wasn't perfectly synced with my movements. My own voice sounded hollow to me, like it was traveling through something unnatural before reaching my ears. And the scar, it wasn't fading. It was becoming more defined. I started searching the house when Lena was gone. The storage building she dismissed so casually became an obsession. Why did she avoid talking about it? Why did her eyes change when I mentioned it? I needed answers, but I was also terrified of what I'd find. Then, one night, as I passed the hallway mirror, I swear it happened again. For just a fraction of a second, the face in the glass didn't move with me. High voltage transition for retention. And if that sounds impossible, what came next would prove I wasn't imagining things at all. The mirror incident left me shaking, but it also gave me clarity. I couldn't keep ignoring the truth. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and the answers weren't going to come from Lena's carefully rehearsed reassurances. They were in that building. The one she told me was just storage the next afternoon. I watched her leave for errands, her movements as perfectly measured as always, her smile like porcelain. The moment her car disappeared around the bend, I felt my heart pounding in my throat. This was it. No more waiting. The key was easy enough to find. She kept it in the third drawer of her desk, tucked under a neat stack of blank stationery, almost like she expected I'd never dare to look. When I stepped outside, the air felt heavier than usual. The building stood at the far edge of the property, half hidden by trees. From a distance, it looked harmless, a simple shed, weathered by time. But the closer I got, the more I noticed how wrong it was. The walls weren't wood like I first thought. They were reinforced metal panels, painted to mimic wood grain. The windows were frosted over, impossible to see through. And the lock wasn't the kind you'd find on an old storage shed. It was industrial. The key slid in smoothly, like it had been waiting for me. The door creaked open with a metallic groan, and a wave of cold, sterile air rushed out. Inside, I didn't find stacks of dusty boxes or forgotten tools. No, what I saw made my stomach twist into knots. Rows of machines lined up against the walls, screens flickering with faint, green-tinted data. In the center of the room, a chair. No, not a chair, more like a surgical pod, strapped with harnesses and surrounded by wires that crawled across the floor like black vines. And then, I saw the photographs, pinned neatly along one wall, dozens of them. Some showed me, some showed Lena, some showed other people I didn't recognize. But the most disturbing ones weren't photographs at all. They were medical diagrams, anatomical sketches, my brain sliced open in clinical detail. At the bottom corner of one, in sharp, efficient handwriting, I read a single word. Phase 2, that was when I heard it. A soft, mechanical hum coming from deeper inside the building. Something was running, something alive. High voltage transition for retention. And when I followed the sound, what I found waiting would change everything I thought I knew about myself. The hum pulled me deeper into the building, each step echoing off the sterile metal walls. My pulse was so loud in my ears I could barely hear myself breathe. At the far end of the corridor, there was another door, smaller, heavier. The sound came from behind it, steady and rhythmic, like the whir of machinery mixed with something disturbingly organic. My hand hesitated on the handle, but curiosity overpowered fear. I pulled. The door swung open, and I froze. Inside the chamber, bathed in pale blue light, stood a tank. Not a water tank, not exactly. This was something else. Cables snaked into it from the ceiling, from the walls, from the floor. And floating inside, suspended in a clear, viscous fluid, was a body. My body, or at least that's what it looked like. The face was mine, though slack, pale, and lifeless. Electrodes clung to the skull. Tubes disappeared into the chest. My stomach lurched as I staggered forward, gripping the glass for balance. This wasn't possible. How could I be staring at myself? That's when the monitors beside the tank flickered. Lines of text scrolled across the screen, clinical and cold. Subject: reconstruction successful. Cognitive split confirmed. Phase 2 pending cognitive split. Reconstruction. The words drilled into my skull. Suddenly, the scar on my head burned like fire. I stumbled back, my knees almost giving out beneath me. The mirror, the scar, Lena's mechanical breathing. None of it was paranoia. None of it was imagination. I wasn't who I thought I was. I wasn't even sure I was human anymore. A hiss broke the silence. The fluid inside the tank began to bubble. For the first time, the body inside stirred, its eyes fluttering open. And when those eyes locked onto mine, I felt the world tilt violently. Because they weren't just eyes. They were my eyes. And the thing inside the tank smiled. High voltage transition for retention. But the real horror wasn't that I was staring at myself. It was what the other me whispered through the speakers next. Crackles sparked from the speakers above the tank. At first it was only static, sharp and hissing. But then, through the distortion came a voice. My voice. Finally it said, low and almost amused. You found me. I stumbled back, shaking my head in denial. This isn't real. The figure inside the chamber twitched against the restraints. Tubes rattled as it leaned closer to the glass, the smile widening into something grotesque. Not real? Tell me, which one of us do you think they kept? Which one do you think Lena tucked into bed at night? My throat tightened. The scar above my ear pulsed like it was alive, and memories I couldn't place flashed through my mind. Children laughing, a woman screaming, hands covered in blood. But they weren't mine. They couldn't be mine. The voice deepened, dripping with venom. They didn't fix you. They split you. Half of you left to rot in here. The other half paraded around as their little experiment in rehabilitation. You're nothing but a puppet for them to feed on. The monitors around the tank flickered again. Data pouring across the screens faster than I could follow. Heart rates, brainwave patterns, chemical balances. 2 sets of readings, both unmistakably human. Both unmistakably me. The thing inside the tank slammed its fist against the glass, sending a sharp tremor through the floor. Fluid sloshed violently. Let me out, it growled, its eyes burning into mine. Let me back. You know you need me. Without me, you're incomplete. Weak. Helpless, I shook my head, clutching at the scar like I could tear the truth out of my skull. The walls seemed to close in, humming louder with every heartbeat. My breathing turned shallow, ragged. And then, behind me, a voice I recognized cut through the chaos. Gentle, calm, terrifyingly familiar. Howard, Lena whispered. Step away from the glass. I turned, and for the first time, the mask she wore slipped. Her eyes glowed faintly in the blue light. Not human, not loving, something else entirely. High voltage transition for retention. And that was the moment I realized the real horror wasn't what was inside the tank. It was what had been sleeping beside me all along. For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Only the faint hiss of the chamber filled the air. Lena's face, usually warm and familiar, was now something else entirely. Too smooth, too symmetrical. Her smile stretched just a fraction wider than it should have. You were never supposed to come this far, she said softly, as though comforting a child. The episodes were a warning sign. You weren't stabilizing. We thought we had more time. I staggered back, my voice breaking. What are you? Her expression didn't change, but her eyes, those perfect, unblinking eyes, shimmered with something inhuman. We are the bond that keeps you alive. Without us, you'd collapse back into what you truly are. Predator. A monster. She tilted her head, almost lovingly. We gave you peace. We gave you family. We gave you me behind me. The thing in the tank let out a guttural laugh, deep and mocking. Do you hear it now, Howard? She's not your savior. She's the jailer. And I'm the part of you that refuses to die. The scar at my temple burned so fiercely I thought my skull might split open. The voices bled together. Lena's soothing tone, the monster's violent roar, until I couldn't tell which belonged to me anymore. I pressed my palms to my ears, desperate to silence them. But the truth was already there, undeniable and merciless. Both of them were right. Without Lena, I was dangerous. Without the other half, I wasn't me. The chamber lights flared, alarms shrieking as cracks spiderwebbed across the glass. Fluid began to leak, pooling around my feet. The restrained figure strained harder, its grin widening with every fracture. Lena stepped closer, her voice steady but urgent. You have to choose, Howard. Stay with me, and you'll never have to feel that darkness again. Or, she glanced at the tank, her tone sharpening. Set him free, and watch the world burn. My chest tightened. The weight of the decision crushed me. Two futures, both unbearable. And then, in that moment of chaos, a horrifying realization struck me like ice water. Maybe the choice had never been mine to make at all. The scar pulsed once more, and a voice inside my own head whispered, not Lena's, not the monster's, my own. You were never one man to begin with. The glass shattered. The lights went out, and everything went silent. High voltage outro hook for retention. But here's the question that lingers. Was I the victim of their experiment, or just the monster they tried and failed to contain? When the lights flickered back on, the room was empty. No broken glass, no body in the tank, no Lena, just me, standing alone, drenched in cold sweat, the silence so deep it pressed against my eardrums. My reflection stared back from the cracked surface of the control panel, and for the first time I wasn't sure who was looking at whom. I stumbled out of the chamber into the night air. The sky above the facility was cloudless, stars scattered like 1,000 watchful eyes. Each one seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with the scar on my temple. That's when I noticed it. A subtle distortion at the edge of my vision, like heat rising off asphalt. Shapes flickered there, too fast to define, but familiar in a way that made my stomach churn. Were they fragments of the creature I'd seen? Or echoes of Lena, waiting just out of sight? Couldn't tell. As I walked home, the streets looked wrong. Angles sharper, shadows deeper. The people I passed didn't move quite naturally, their gestures just a beat off like puppets lagging behind the strings. When I tried to focus, they snapped back into place, smiling, nodding, normal. But I knew better now. By the time I reached my front door, my hands were trembling so violently I could barely fit the key into the lock. Inside, everything was pristine, too pristine. No trace of struggle, no sign Lena had ever left. Her favorite mug sat waiting on the table, still warm, as if she had just poured coffee. I picked it up with shaking hands, pressed it to my lips. The taste was bitter, metallic, wrong. And then I heard it, faint, almost gentle, her breathing, perfectly steady, perfectly mechanical, coming from upstairs. My scar burned like fire, and my vision blurred. Somewhere, deep inside, a voice whispered, "The story doesn't end here. It never does." I dropped the mug. It shattered, and the breathing stopped. Sleep became impossible after that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, every flicker of the streetlights outside carried a weight it never had before. I could feel something pressing in on me. Not physically, but like a shadow hanging just behind my thoughts. The scar on my temple began to pulse, not randomly, but in patterns. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, pause, over and over like a code I couldn't decipher. At first, I thought it was just nerves, but the rhythm matched something else, something I'd heard before. The tank. the slow, deliberate thrum of whatever lived inside it. I tried to ignore it, but the world around me wasn't making sense anymore. Strangers seemed to linger when I passed, their eyes locking onto me a second too long. One man in a coffee shop smiled, but his teeth didn't quite fit his mouth. A woman on the bus whispered words that sounded like my name, though I'd never seen her before. And Lena? She carried on as if nothing had changed. She laughed. She cooked. She kissed me goodnight, but there was no warmth behind it. Her touch lingered like static electricity, her eyes too bright, too precise. The worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I heard. At night, in that fragile space between waking and sleep, voices would seep through the walls. Not loud, not clear, just fragments. My name, numbers, a phrase repeated over and over. The vessel is ready, I'd bolt upright, heart hammering, only to find Lena beside me, her breathing steady, her body still as stone. And then, sometimes, I'd hear a second breathing. Not hers, not mine, coming from the scar itself. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The pulses at my temple were more than just random nerve twitches. They had intention. One night, desperate, I sat at my desk with a notepad, marking every beat like a prisoner scratching days into a cell wall. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. Pause. For beats. Long pause. Then it would start again. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but when I mapped it out over hours, the pattern repeated with perfect precision. This wasn't my body malfunctioning, it was a code. I spent nights hunched over my laptop, cross-referencing Morse, binary, even ancient cipher texts. Nothing matched exactly, but the rhythm bore the unmistakable logic of communication. Someone, or something, was speaking through me. The breakthrough came when I realized the pulses weren't just numbers, they were coordinates. When I converted the sequences into latitude and longitude, my stomach dropped. The location pointed to an abandoned airstrip 20 miles outside town. The same direction Lena never wanted me to drive. My hands shook as I traced the spot on the map. Suddenly, memories surged. Flashes of bright lights, metal tables, shadows moving above me while I screamed but made no sound. The scar burned hot, almost as if it knew I was getting closer to understanding. That night, when I told Lena I'd been thinking of taking a drive out in the country, her smile faltered. Just for a second, her fork paused above her plate. And then, too smoothly, she said, "Maybe tomorrow, when you're stronger," the exact same words she'd used before. The coordinates wouldn't leave my mind. That airstrip, 20 miles of empty road between me and the truth, became an obsession. I couldn't focus on anything else. Even Lena's gentle humming while she cooked felt like static buzzing in my skull. That night, after she fell into her perfect, mechanical sleep, I slipped out of bed and opened my laptop again. The pulses in my scar seemed stronger, as if urging me on, almost guiding me. The code repeated 3, 2, 4, pause. I whispered it aloud, and a thought chilled me. Was it really me decoding the signal, or was the signal decoding me? I dug deeper. Public records on the abandoned airstrip were scarce, almost scrubbed. No mention in county files, no property owner listed. But after hours of chasing dead links, I found something, a declassified memo buried in an online archive. The document referenced a Project Echo with vague notes about neurological reconstruction trials and prototype vessel integration. No names, no details, just cold, clinical phrases. That was enough. My scar pulsed like a heartbeat when I read those words. Vessel integration, reconstruction. It wasn't just an accident I'd survived. It was something else. The next morning, I tested Lena. I asked her casually if she'd ever heard of Project Echo. For the briefest instant, the fork in her hand trembled. Not enough for most people to notice, but I noticed. Her mask slipped, and when she looked at me again, the smile was too perfect, the tone too calm. "Sweetheart," she said. Sometimes curiosity does more harm than good. Her words were soft, but her eyes weren't Lena's anymore. They were the eyes of someone watching me, monitoring me, almost evaluating me. Later that day, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection again. I traced the scar at my temple with shaking fingers. My skin was warm to the touch, but beneath it, I could swear there was something metallic, like a filament. My reflection wavered in the mirror, not distorted like glass, but wrong in a way I couldn't explain. For the first time, the thought hit me full force. What if Lena wasn't my caretaker? What if she was my handler? And worse, what if I wasn't me anymore? The pulses quickened, urgent now, almost panicked, as if warning me, or calling me.